Welcome back, everyone. Welcome to the show. This is Cillianmurphy. I'm recording this from the basement of my house, as usual. You're listening to Six Music, the greatest radio station in the world. Now, we started this evening with a double hit of optimism, because I think we need something to keep us going into the night. You just heard Donna Summer, and then you heard Curtis Mayfield back to back. And I think that those two tunes contain pure distilled positivity in every single note. So the Donna Summer track was State of Independence. That was released on her self-titled album in 1982, and that was produced by the great Quincy Jones and written by Vangelis and John Anderson of Yes. Before you heard Move On Up, you heard some Curtis Mayfield from the archive. Now, last week I played some Curtis Mayfield with the Impressions, and I used the word genius. That's not a word that I would ever use lightly, but I think when you're talking about Curtis Mayfield, you can use that with great confidence. And you heard Curtis talking about his very unique guitar tuning, and then you heard Move On Up. And that was from his 1970 album, Curtis. That was produced by Curtis Mayfield himself. Now that we're in that optimistic place, thanks to Donna Summer and Curtis Mayfield, let's try and keep it going until I hit you with some sad songs later on. But first, let's have a listen to some Minnie Riperton and her extraordinary 5-octave voice. This is Reasons. Minnie Riperton with Reasons. It is really something else, her voice. When she hits those high notes, it doesn't sound real. It doesn't sound like human, but it is. She was an extraordinary vocalist. We're going to stay in the 70s now. The track I'm going to play for you is a track called Why Can't We Live Together? This is from an artist called Timmy Thomas. And it's a great track, but what sets it apart is that apparently it was the first record to use the Roland 808, that very famous drum machine. So it was the first record to fully replace real, live, human drummers with the Roland 808. We're going to hear from an artist now called Bullion, and this is a track called Over Mona, and it's from the album called We Had a Good Time. I really like this. See what you think. So the next two songs you're going to hear have been floating around on playlists of mine for a while. They're two wonderful songs, but it was only when I started listening to them, I guess in the context of what is going on in the world right now, that all this extra meaning in them was revealed to me. I suppose that is the great thing about art. Its prescience and its potency is fluid, and it can mean different things at different times. See if you feel the same. The first track is called A Song About Holding Hands by Gregor from the album Silver Drop that came out in 2018. And then after that, you're going to hear from Malcolm Middleton and a track called Blue Plastic Bags. Malcolm Middleton, of course, is one half of Arab Strap. Ah, so good. Such a good track. He put out an album with David Shrigley in 2014 called Music and Words, which you should really have a listen to. I've talked with David Shrigley on this program before. He's a visual artist, and he also makes music, clearly, with Malcolm Middleton. Now we're going to hear from Sampa the Great, from her album The Return, which was out last year on Ninja Tune. There is a bang of energy off this track. It's called Oh My God, or OMG, as the kids say. Brittany Howard put out her debut solo album called Jamie in 2019. And I'm going to play you a track from that, but it's remixed by Bon Iver. The track is called Short and Sweet. And Brittany Howard says that the album was inspired by things she saw when she was traveling across the US. And she says, there were long moments of silence in the car when I would just sit and reflect. And I wondered what it was that I wanted for myself next. And I suppose all I want is to help others feel a bit better about being. All I can offer are my own stories in hope of not only being seen and understood, but also to learn to love my own self as if it were an act of resistance. We're going to go back to the 1960s for this next track. This is a Bob Dylan track. He wrote this when he was living in Woodstock and hanging out with the band. They lived in a house called The Big Pink, and then they made this amazing album called Music from Big Pink. But this is the Byrds covering a track that he wrote during that period, and this is called You Ain't Going Nowhere. Plain and sane and simple melody. That was from Ted Lucas. That was from his self-titled album from 1975. That was recorded mostly in his attic. It doesn't sound like that. I thought it mixed nicely in with the birds. It has that kind of beautiful, wistful quality to it. Why don't we have some music from Brazil now? Please forgive my brutal Portuguese, but the band you're about to hear from is called Quarteto MC, and the tune is called Tudo Que Voce Podia Ser. The band is four sisters, and they released this in 1972, and I believe they are from the Tropicalia movement in Brazil. Anyway, this is excellent. I had to play a bit of Nick Cave after Scott Walker. That was Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. We Real Cool from Push the Sky Away, which was released in 2013. So let's try and keep some of the atmosphere of Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds in the room. The next record I'm going to play features Jim White, who's the drummer from the Dirty Three, and Warren Ellis. He plays the fiddle or the violin in the Dirty Three, and Warren Ellis is a Bad Seed. So there, see, drawing the lines. This track is Jim White and Marissa Anderson, and the track is called The Lucky. What's lovely about this album is that it's Jim White and Marissa Anderson, who's a guitar player, improvising together. They didn't rehearse or practice before they went into the studio. And Jim White says, it's good to suspend disbelief at this stage of playing. So it makes for a gorgeous, organic, exploratory kind of music. Kim Gordon, who you'll know from Sonic Youth, released her debut solo album last year called No Home Record. And I'm going to play you a track from it. This is called Sketch Artist. I haven't played any Nadine Shah for a while on the radio, so you're going to hear some now. She put out a new record in June, and it's amazing. And this is a track called Club Cougar. And Nadine says about this track, there's many names for a woman who dates a younger man. Can you think of any examples of names given to men that date younger women? Much of this album is about contradiction, this song especially. Right, let's do some songs from under the stairs, will we?
Songs from under the stairs.
This week, I excavated an old CD from 1995. And I got a terrible shock when I realized that 1995 is 25 years ago. Isn't that insane? It does not feel like 25 years ago. I went back and looked on the internet and looked up what was happening in 1995. So this might take you back. In 1995, Windows 95 was born. Does everybody remember Windows 95 with its amazing startup sound designed by Brian Eno? Let's have a listen to that startup sound. I remember sending my first email in 1995, or maybe it was 1996, and I remember thinking, this will never catch on. It's ridiculous. I'm going out to write a postcard. In 1995, Clinton was president in the US. John Major was PM in the UK. In Ireland, divorce was finally and narrowly made legal. Seamus Heaney won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1995. Musically, the big albums in 95, The Bends, The Great Escape by Blur, Jagged Little Pill by Alanis Morissette, Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness by The Pumpkins. Movies, what was happening in movies? Heat, Seven, Waterworld, Clueless, Ace Ventura, Casino. I mean, a mixed bag. The track that I've picked is a Radiohead track. It's off The Bends. Well, Fake Plastic Trees was a single from The Bends, and this is the C-side on the CD single. I listened to this song over and over again when I was about 19, because at the time it seemed to capture with real clarity that in-between time. You know, when you're not quite an adult, but you're definitely not a child anymore, and the kind of uncertainty of that time. The backing singer on this version is Diane Swan of the band Julie Dolphin. They were supporting Radiohead in 94 apparently, and there's only one known live performance of this track with the full band, and that was in 95 in Japan. Anyway, this is the song. It's Radiohead with How Can You Be Sure. That was from 1982. That was the opening track on Elvis Costello and the Attractions album called Imperial Bedroom. The track's called Beyond Belief. That was produced by Jeff Emmerich. He was a sound engineer who worked on many of the Beatles records, Revolver and Peppers and Abbey Road. I'll always drop in a Beatles factoid if there's one at hand. Now, here's more music from 1982. This is The Beat and Save It For Later. I love this song. I will read this little thing because I spoke earlier about, that in-between time of, moving from adolescence into adulthood and being so confused. Well, this song is kind of about that. Here's what Dave Wakeling from The Beat said about it. It was about turning from a teenager into someone in their 20s and realizing that the effortless promise of your teenage years was not necessarily going to show that life was so simple as you started to grow up. So it was about being lost, about not really knowing your role in the world, trying to find your place in the world. So you couldn't find your own way in that world, and you'd have all sorts of people telling you this and that and advising you, and it didn't actually seem like they knew better. So it was like, keep your advice to yourself, save it for later. I'm going to play you some more music from The Fall. I've played them several times over the last few weeks. I can't resist it. This track is called Blindness. And this is from the album Fall Heads Roll, which was released in 2005. So let's have some Irish music. The Fontaines DC put out their second album this year. And I love that band, and I saw them play before Christmas, and it's just heartbreaking that they couldn't tour that record. It's an amazing record. I would love to see it live. This is the opening single from it. It's called A Hero's Death. And when live music comes back, that is a show to book. Go and see the Fontaines DC. They're amazing live. I'm going to play you a song that I could probably do a whole show about if I had the time. It's a Lou Reed track, and it's called Street Hassle, off the album Street Hassle. It's from 1978. I'll talk a little bit more after it. Before you hear the track, you're going to hear from Lou Reed himself talking about his writing process, I suppose. Isn't that just remarkable? A remarkable piece of music. And it's a recording in which Bruce Springsteen turns up about halfway through and does an uncredited spoken word piece. And that's actually one of the least remarkable things about the song. The song is composed of 3 distinct parts. Chapter 1, which is Waltzing Matilda. Chapter 2, Street Hassle. And Chapter 3, Slip Away. You should look up the song or the whole making of that album because it's fascinating. And it just shows what a true artist Lou Reed was. And now it's that time in the evening where we stop and have a little bit of poetry. The poet we're going to hear from this evening is called Anthony Anaxaguru. His second collection, After the Formalities, is out now. And this poem he's going to read for us tonight is called Across From Here. That was Ola Schmidt, and that was called Rooted. Isn't that lovely? That was released in January this year. Before that, you heard from Everything Is Recorded, featuring Infinite Coles and Maria Somerville. I played Maria Somerville on the show sometime before. She's an Irish composer, and that is from the second Everything Is Recorded album called Friday Forever. And the record tells a story through music that starts at 9:46 p.m, very specifically, on a Friday night, and then finishes at 11:59 a.m. the next morning. And it's supposed to be an investigation into the universality of the Friday night experience. We're going to have some William Tyler now. William Tyler is a Nashville guitarist and composer, and he wrote this in March during the lockdown. I'm going to read you this because it's worth reading out. I came back to Nashville during the shutdown in March to be close to my parents, and in that space of isolation, I've been trying to get back to some of the sonic building blocks that made me want to start making music in the first place. Listening to a lot of old cassettes, slightly warped records, nature recordings, sounds that kind of inhabit a smallness and intimacy, sounds that do in fact decay, the beautiful saturated analog reality that is alive around us. This is exactly my type of music. This is called With News About Heaven. That's about all from me tonight. I thought that to finish up I would play some Laurie Anderson. We had that epic tune from Lou Reed earlier, and this track that you're going to hear, it's a collaboration between Lou Reed and Laurie Anderson. He co-wrote and sang on this track. It's called In Our Sleep. The album was produced by Brian Eno. By the way, I would love to count the amount of times that Brian Eno has turned up on this show so far, either as an artist in his own right or as a producer or as an inspiration to other artists. It just shows the range and depth of his influence on contemporary music over the years. But for now, I'm going to finish with Laurie Anderson and In Our Sleep. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. I will see you all next week. Thanks to Angela Davis for putting this all together. I'll catch you all next week. Mind yourselves.